Welcome to Broadcasting Your Side Hustle, where the goal is to help you start a client attraction podcast so you can stand out in your niche, get more business, and step further into your purpose. That is the mission. That is the sole purpose of this show. And we are going to start with the big, huge question: how do you start a client attraction podcast? When you're thinking about starting a podcast, there's lots of things that go through your mind. And those things can range anywhere from, well, what are you going to talk about? Where are you going to host the show? How are you going to get the word out? All of these things are what I call satellite problems. They're not the core issue. The core issue is, how are you going to start this thing so that clients see you, know your value, and become a lead and eventually become a client? How do you do that? Well, it's not through answering all of those satellite problems that we just went through. It's by addressing one thing, and one thing only that will help you launch this show and be successful with it. You need to own your hole. Your client right now is stuck in a hole. They have a problem. They're down in that deep, dark hole and they don't know how to get out. But you do. You know this hole because you've been there before. You know everything around this problem and you know how to get out. Your client needs to understand that you've been there. You know this thing, you know this problem, and you can be their guide to get out. That is the number one thing that you need to communicate in your podcast episodes, is the main problem that you solve. And we'll go into other things that you can do, how to build up your content and your episode list later. But that is the one thing that you need to communicate. You need to own your hole. In the process of describing the hole that your listeners are in, your potential clients are in, there is also one thing that you do not want to do. You do not want to tell your story. That might sound weird. That might sound counterintuitive, but think about it for a minute. If you were in search of a solution to a problem that you are experiencing, you're looking for this solution and someone pops up through either Google search or somebody recommended a certain company or a certain person to you, and you go check it out. And the first thing that you do is you get to listen to them tell their story about how their grandpa started the business and they were in there since the time they were a kid. They worked all the way up from the stock room, all the way up to, from sweeping the floors to the stock room to being a cashier to assistant manager, all of these things, all the way up to top to finally owning the company. And that's why they're the best person to help solve your problem. Do you care? Probably not, right? All you care about is, does this person understand the problem that I have? Can they guide me out of it? And what's my life going to look like after this problem is solved? That's what you care about. You don't care about their story. You don't care about hearing how they started and lost the business and became homeless, and then they had to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and they got it all back again. Like, yeah, that's great, but that doesn't help convince you that this person's the right person to solve your problem. They just have been through a hard time and they made it out. Well, great, but how does that help you, right? So relay the problem of the hole that you help your clients dig out of, but do not tell your story. What you can do, and this is something that I believe that you ought to do, is be a proxy for your clients. And what I mean by that is you tell your story without really telling your story. And it mostly reflects back to your listeners the problem that you help them solve. Let's say, for example, that you help businesses with their messaging regarding their marketing and advertising. Okay. You help them with their messaging. And the story that you tell is you have a book that you wrote about this whole subject. And you ended up sitting next to somebody on a plane ride who had your book. And you had a conversation with them. Now, they had no idea who you were. You had this conversation. And through that conversation, you realized that book focuses way too much on you and your story. You could have added so much more value. You could have gone deeper on certain things, but instead the pages were taken up with you and your story, your experiences. And you realized right then, you've got a messaging problem. Crap. The person that wrote this book, the expert, has a messaging problem. Well, now what? So now you develop a framework. You develop these 10 steps to get people from point A to point B, and this is what their life's going to look like after they implement these steps. That is what you want to relay to your client. That simple story about sitting next to someone on the airline, you realize you have the messaging problem, this is how you fixed it, and this is how your life is better afterwards. Did you tell your full story? No. You told just a part of it, just enough to help your customer realize you know what you're talking about, your listeners know that you know what you're talking about, and you can help them out of that hole. That is how you be a proxy to tell your story and still mostly focus on your audience. The next thing that you can do when it comes to showing people that you're the right guide to help them get out of that hole that you own is you can give them clues. Give them clues that you can go much deeper. And what does that mean? Well, earlier on, we talked about satellite problems in relationship to starting a podcast. Where are you going to host it? How are you going to distribute? All of those little satellite problems and issues, right? Well, that's what you want to kind of just hint to in maybe your first episode. Help them understand, help your audience understand that you can go deeper, that there's more to you than just one question, one answer, and that they might be dealing with something that is a satellite problem around the core issue of helping people with their messaging. Speaking of satellite problems, make sure you tune into the next episode because we're going to go into that more in depth and how you can use those satellite problems to make your show more robust and more consistent. So make sure that you tune in for that episode. Also, if you got value from this episode, all that I would ask is whatever platform you're on, however you can show love to this episode, show support, please do that. Only if you got value. If you didn't get value, you don't have to do anything. Don't like, don't subscribe, all those things. You don't have to. But if you did get value, please let me know that you did by subscribing, liking, following, again, whatever the platform lets you do. Also, if you have questions, if you have concerns about building your client attraction podcast or this whole podcasting world, in the comments below, let me know. Let me know what questions you have, because I will use those questions to build out more episodes. Because this whole thing is not about me. This is about you. I'm doing this for you so you can build your business, leave the 9-to-5 world, and be the person that you're meant to be. But I can't do that if you don't tell me how to help you. So give me those questions. Let's create more magic, more community together. And until then, peace. See you in the next one.